This episode is going to be a bit different from my normal videos. There's no researched content, no wild story about people I don't know. It's more of a personal story about a family I grew up with and have immense respect for. I've seen a lot of hate for foreigners and immigrants in Canada as of late, although the problem isn't anything new. But I digress. Sit back, relax, and have a listen about a second-hand tale that is near and dear to my heart. When I was in elementary school, I met a kid and we became fast friends. My father is an immigrant from Italy and his was an immigrant from Czechia, at the time Czechoslovakia. Throughout the years, our families grew closer and closer together, and our parents used to swap stories about living in the old country, its joys and its sorrows. My father had grown up in post-war Italy, in one of the poorest areas. His father was born in a post-war Soviet puppet state whose economy was solely benefiting the USSR. I recall them sharing wine and stories one night, and after a few too many glasses, his face would go serious and mention how every time he sees something colored red, from candy to stop signs, he would think of communism and shudder. To say he had a distaste for Soviet communism is putting it lightly. He had lived through the Prague Spring and had seen what the Russians were capable of. While on a ski trip, when all the children were supposed to be sleeping, I stayed up and listened to him talking to my mother about the time he was in the Czech army. He spoke of the cruel practices of Soviet commanders, like throwing tear gas grenades into sealed rooms and hoping that all the soldiers got their gas masks on in time. Now, this practice is still used in many armies to this day. However, as a teenage conscript, it hit him a bit differently. He recalls trying to help a fellow conscript to put his gas mask on and failing. The gasping breaths for clean air and silent cries for help were seared into his mind. Regardless, he was stuck in the Soviet army now, and tried to make the best of it. The final straw came when he was asked to fire upon fellow Czechs. He, as with many people on the eastern side of the Iron Curtain, had the desperate need to flee by any means possible. So whether he was discharged or deserted, I never found out. But somehow, he ended up out of the army and with a fake West German passport on a bus to Austria. Seated beside him was a woman that he would come to know very well for the next few decades. But currently, she was pretending to be his wife. Once at the border, the two of them spoke the best German they could muster and sat in silence while the guards checked every passenger. Miraculously, they made it across. Now there was a new problem. What do they do now? Supposedly, they were a couple, a married couple, but really they were just two strangers who had each other's backs until they crossed the Iron Curtain. Should they stick together? Freedom can be a foreign and scary concept when it's gained through less than scrupulous means. It was decided they would stick together and play the ruse out. They would start a new life, away from prying eyes and cruel tactics of the STB. In fact, they would come to Canada, which was the land of opportunity at the time. Once across the Atlantic, they would assume their original names and nationalities, and live as themselves, to be whoever they wanted to be. The only trait they kept from their past life was the fake marriage. It was cheaper and easier, if they were going to stick together, to just lie and say they were married. They eventually made their way to Edmonton, Alberta, where he would get a job as a construction worker and she would be a homemaker to their 3 children. He would bond with fellow expat Czechs and Europeans and eventually start a successful construction company on his own. So as I said before, our families would go on many trips, and as the Iron Curtain fell and the USSR crumbled, he would long to take his family back to Czechia to meet their long-lost cousins, aunts, and uncles. On one trip in the late 2000s, my family was conveniently in Italy, and we met up with them as they toured the Amalfi Coast. There, he would see a ring in one of the shop windows, and finally buy it for his wife. After decades of being married thanks to a fake passport and a desire to survive oppressive Czech communism, they would make it official and be married. Unfortunately, after that trip, I had gone down a different path with my life and stopped seeing their family as a consequence. And we would lose touch sometime until 2015, when I was informed that he had a massive heart attack while shoveling snow off his driveway. The years of hard work and tireless effort to raise his family had taken their toll. Thankfully, he was able to see his children graduate, and some of them get married. He even got to meet his grandchildren. At the funeral, as I hugged his son for the first time in 5 years, he looked at me and said, "Do you remember those ski trips?" "Yeah, I do. I always will." Thanks for watching.